Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2022 science fiction horror film, The Area 51 Incident, a film that is directed by Rhys Frake Waterfield, and it stars Sean Altman, Craig David Dowsett, Megan Purvis, Harry Boxley, and Chris Cordell, as well as Scott Jeffrey. Now, if that name sounds familiar, Scott Jeffrey. Well, Scott Jeffrey is a writer and producer who has brought us many a low-budget UK-based horror science fiction film over the last few years. I personally have reviewed a number of them on this channel, probably at least half a dozen, maybe more in the last 12 months. Most of them are fairly middling to poor. And how does this one differ? Well, this one focuses on, there's a site in the UK called Area 51, which we'll gloss over. And at this site, there is been this wormhole discovered. A bit like, imagine like Stranger Things, they got that thing down in the cellar, down in the basement in Stranger Things that things can come in and out of. It's a similar concept in many ways. And while there are these two, don't know what students, I suppose, or somebody like that, who is at this base doing some research, it all kicks off and some beasties decide to come through this portal stroke wormhole into our world and cause chaos and mayhem. There is a group of survivors that make their way to an underground military bunker where they think they will be safe. However, with this being a horror science fiction film, they are certainly far from safe. Right, what are my thoughts on the Area 51 incident? Well, as I've mentioned, I've reviewed quite a few of these, like Scott Jeffrey type films on the channel over the last couple of years, probably. They are certainly watchable, but you have to check your expectations when you go into these type of films. They are low-budget affairs. But I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised by this film. I thought it had lofty ambitions. I thought the effects for the level of this film were actually of a pretty good standard, and it plays around with some well-known and well-used horror sci-fi tropes, and it does them fairly effectively. So what you've got really is, when it all kicks off and these creatures come through this wormhole, you've got all that chaos going on outside that this film doesn't have the budget to cope with. Occasionally you'll see one of these bigger beasties, and you'll hear about these beasties on news stations saying how they're causing havoc around the country, etc. But most of the sci-fi horror elements of this film happen in this underground bunker. And as you could imagine, it manifests itself in ways that you would expect. Infections, creatures, coming from within, like Alien, all that kind of stuff. And it plays around with horror stroke sci-fi tropes that we've seen time and time again. The things that you've seen in things like The Thing, Alien, all that kind of stuff, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, all that kind of stuff. But I think, rather than when you watch these you kind of roll your eyes, I think it does it fairly effectively. And that's because everybody kind of takes the material fairly seriously. Even though it's a bit odd in the way some of these actors perform the roles, because it's based in England, or at least you think it's based in England, and some of the actors are doing American accents, and I'm not sure if they're English or not, and some of them are doing English accents. So I understand why they're doing it to appeal to a broader audience, but it makes the film feel unbalanced. You know what I mean? Where's it based? Who are these characters? Where are they from? Why is he speaking American? Why is he speaking English? And it all feels, like I say, I think overall it affects the film. Just stick with whether it's UK, American, and just go with it. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily think you need to blend accents and all that kind of stuff. I do generally think it harms these films, and I think they do it quite a lot in these type of films. It is corny as hell. It's goofy, cheap, but it's hard to kind of not like it. It's got a real element of charm about it. And it does get you now and again, you know what I mean, in regards to a few jump scares here and there, and a few effective horror scenes, body horror scenes here and there and everywhere. And I thought the makeup effects were done pretty well, and I thought some of the direction was fairly effective. You've got people walking into a darkened room and you can see someone on the floor, you know something's wrong. Something's not going to be right. And they're walking up to them slowly, and the lighting's just right. The music's just right. It's building up the tension, and lo and behold, boom, it kicks off. And it adds to that effect because I thought the makeup effects were pretty good. So I thought, out of probably all the Scott Jeffries films that I've seen, and there may be others that I think are better than this, or certainly on par with this, this one felt really ambitious, and it really felt like they tried to put every single penny on screen. And yes, I mean, if you go into this film with high expectations, you're going to be absolutely appalled at it. If you go in this film and you tone down your expectations, you might be pleasantly surprised with what this film has to offer. I thought it was fairly effective with what it tried to do. I thought it really tried to make use of the budget. I thought there was some clever casting going on. Megan Purvis, for example, I think is really underrated. You see her in a lot of low-budget films. You see her in a lot of Scott Jeffrey films. And I think she's pretty good. I've never seen her give a bad performance in any of these low-budget films. And I think that could be said for everybody in this film. I don't think there's anybody you can point your finger at and say that was a poor performance. They all do a decent job. They take the material seriously, so that it keeps you engaged throughout. And you actually care about some of these characters when it's all going down as well. So yeah, there are some issues with this film, clearly, in regards to some of the effects here and there, and some of the things that it plays around with in regards to its horror tropes, and it treads on familiar ground. But I don't necessarily mind it if it does it fairly effectively, and it doesn't give you a massively over-convoluted and complex plot. It's fairly simple in what it's trying to do, and it is aware of the budget restrictions, and I think it does pretty well. So I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. I actually considered a 6 out of 10, which is really a high score for some of these low-budget films, in my opinion, but I'll stick with a 5. I do think it's fair, because I do think some people will watch this film and be like, what is this? And there'll be others that will understand what they're watching and think, there's some effort gone into this, and I'm kind of in that train of thought. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you found it useful. I'll be back with plenty more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.